Hi, this is Mike Wagner with your Essex Surf Housing tip for the day. Today we're going to be talking about how to replace the front element on your front port. The supplies which you're going to need is a new Essex front element. You will need Q-tips, makeup removal pads, which are available at the local drugstore, denatured alcohol, or in Europe and Australia it's also known as methylated spirits, denatured alcohol. 100% silicone adhesive, a screwdriver, a piece of 180 grit sandpaper, and some tape. The first thing we're going to do is remove the 3 screws that hold the lens element in place. Once we've removed the 3 screws and set them aside, we can take a straight edge razor blade, and we want to introduce the razor blade between the black piece of plexiglass and our lens element. I've already started this, but when you're starting it, be very, very careful not to cut yourself and to not damage the plexiglass. You want to very gently introduce that razor blade in between the two. And then we can gently pull the blade towards us. Again, being very careful not to cut ourselves. And what we're doing is we're breaking the silicone seal that's been keeping this front lens element in place and thus watertight. We've broken the seal. We can discard the old piece. We need to clean up all of this silicone before we install the new lens element, and I can use the straight edge razor blade as a draw knife, and I can draw it along the plexiglass and remove as much of the silicone as I can. By drawing the knife towards me, we are not pushing it and slicing into the plexiglass. We want to draw the knife as much as possible. And you'll see areas of silicone that come up very easily, other areas that don't. And if you keep working at it, and you can rub some off with your fingers like that, we want to get as much of this silicone off as possible before we move on to the next preparation step. We then need to do a final cleanup, and that is done with a piece of glass that I have. You can use a glass tabletop and a piece of 180 grit wet dry sandpaper. We'll take our port and we'll turn it upside down, and we'll gently move it around in circles. And what we are doing is removing any excess silicone. If there's any silicone left, you'll be able to see it. If so, just do a few more circles. Very gentle circles, keeping the front port flat. Inspect it every so often. And it looks like we're good to go. Now we need to clean this up as much as possible. Once we have our front port clean of any excess silicone, I'll take a makeup removing pad, dip it into a little bit of denatured alcohol or methylated spirits, and I'll just wipe the mating surface nice and clean. One final cleanup there, and I'll make sure that there are no pieces of lint left behind by the makeup removing pad. Then we get our silicone. This is 100% silicone. I use silicone that's made by the company DAP. You can get it at your local hardware store. And you want to make sure that you clean off the tip of your silicone tube so that you don't have any old silicone being applied with the new. I hold the tube in an upright vertical orientation, and I gently squeeze on it. And what I'm doing is I'm wetting out the plexiglass. If you've ever seen a glasser glass a surfboard, you know that he pours the resin onto the fiberglass cloth and he wets it out with a squeegee. So by holding this tube in a vertical manner and dabbing at the mating surface in an up and down motion while squeezing out some silicone, I'm wetting out the black plexiglass. And so we want to wet the plexiglass out completely, making sure that we have more than enough silicone for our installation. And that looks good. We get our replacement front lens element, and it has a top and a bottom. The bottom is flat, the top has a rounded edge on it. I like to peel back the upper layer of protective paper on the top and get it completely loose. Then I fold over the three corners. This way, when I insert the machine screws, they do not hang up on that plastic. Once the three sides are folded back, you can remove the protective paper on the back side of the lens element. Simply peel it off while holding the lens element by the edges. And you want to make sure that around the screw holes here, there's not a little piece of protective paper left behind. Sometimes it rips and tears. We'll have a little piece of paper left behind right here. Once our lens element is ready to go, we gently drop it onto the front element. And we want to get at least one screw started to help hold it in place. Once that screw is in, then we can start to put the other screws in. Now I'm tightening these screws up, but I'm not squeezing the silicone yet. I want to get all three screws started before I start to squeeze the silicone. And all three screws are started. So now I'm going to start to squeeze the silicone, and we can see it oozing out. Again, as with the pistol grips, we're bringing two flat surfaces together. Once the lens element is touching the front port, our job is done. We don't need to over tighten these screws. So as you tighten it, you'll see the air bubbles being pushed out. You'll see the silicone oozing out from the edges. It's oozing to the inside, but don't worry, we're going to clean all of that up. And I'm just, once I feel that my screws are nice and snug, that's about it. Oh, this one was a little loose. That's good. And the final one. Now that we've tightened up the screws, we need to clean up the excess silicone. Use a Q-tip and draw it along the edge, picking up excess silicone. Grab a fresh Q-tip. Do it on the second side. Grab another Q-tip. Do it on that side. Then you can grab another one and do behind each screw. And for the final cleanup, we are going to use our denatured alcohol or methylated spirits for those of you who are in Australia or Europe. I dip my Q-tip in a little bit of denatured alcohol. I kind of squeeze it out a little bit, and I'll do a swab of the front housing. And I can see the denatured alcohol cleaning up the silicone. You do that on all three sides. Then we move on to using a makeup removing pad. Again, dip it in the denatured alcohol, keeping it fairly damp, and now we can really get rid of all of that silicone. The denatured alcohol cleans it up really, really good, and it does not harm your plexiglass. Again, you can never use too many Q-tips or makeup removal pads. You'll go through a lot of them. And that is fairly clean. Now I'll remove the protective paper, and we have to clean the inside. Take a Q-tip and remove the excess silicone. Again, using lots of Q-tips. It makes your job very easy. There might be some silicone on the sidewall, which you'll have to clean up. Use a dry Q-tip and remove as much of the silicone as you can, as we'll be going back in with the denatured alcohol to do our final wiping. But right now I'm trying to get the Q-tip into the corner as much as possible and removing as much silicone as I can. Now I'll get my makeup removing pad, dip it in a little denatured alcohol, squeeze it out a little bit, and I can see the pad removing the silicone. I'm not too sure if you can see that or not. And I'll keep doing this until all the silicone has been removed. So we've wiped the silicone clean of the plexiglass. You will see a residual film from the denatured alcohol. That is okay. We will clean that up later. The main thing is to clean off as much of the silicone as possible. Let it sit for 2 or 3 hours, and then you can come back with a warm soapy solution and wash the outside. You can even wash the inside with your warm soapy solution and towel dry it with a very soft towel, and you'll be good to go with a new Essex front lens element. This is Mike Wagner with your Essex Surf Housings tip for the day.